And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
What's up, RBLR Nation? Hope everyone's having a great week. Zach and myself, we're both a little under the weather. We hope y'all are not under the weather. I know it's that time of year, school's coming to close and, everyone's kind of just tired and ready for everything to be over and for summer to start. Our producer's even sick, Mr. Eureka Wheeler. So good gracious, we're all kind of under the weather, but we're still bringing some great Bucs content to y'all because there's still some Bucs news that happens. But before we go any further, I'd love for y'all to hit that like and subscribe button if you like what you hear. We're going to have some more great content throughout this offseason, and obviously once the regular season actually starts. And hopefully neither of us will be sick next week. That'd be wonderful. And you can also give us a follow at RBLR Sports on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We've got some great content across our channel from the Rays, Bucs, Lightning, Rowdies, you name it, Tampa Bay sports, we've got it. So before we start our show, though, I'd love to introduce my co-host. I've already mentioned him a few times, but Mr. Zach Blaine, say what's up to everyone.
What's going on, Carter? How you doing today? I know you're sick, so outside of being sick, how's your day going, brother?
Oh, wonderful. If I wasn't sick, this would be a great weekend. I've got nothing really going on. There's this crab cake food truck thing that's going to be in Wiregrass that me and my girlfriend are probably, or my girlfriend and I are probably going to go to. Excuse me, my mother would kill me.
We got a Camping World stadium or a Camping World that just opened up right by our house, and they're having event. I don't want an RV, but if I can win one for free, I'll throw my name in the hat.
For sure. Yeah, we got
tomorrow.
We're out in Brandon, and we're like 5 minutes. Well, technically Riverview, but we're in Brandon, so we're 5 minutes away from that Bass Pro shop that's off of I-75. Ooh. I don't know if you're familiar. There's like the Top Golf, and then there's the Bass Pro shop.
I live. It's funny because here in Tennessee, I'm 5 minutes from Bass Pro as well, and I love Bass Pro.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not really much into like outdoor stuff. But yeah, it's a cool spot. It's a cool spot. There's a lot of cool stuff. But anyways, before we'll get into some actual Bucs news instead of just yammering on about Bass Pro Shops. My goodness. But the big news this week for the Bucs was Antoine Winfield Jr. 4 years, $84 million, the highest paid defensive back ever. Like that includes corners and safeties. He reset the whole market, which was it's the first time a safety has ever set that record. Really cool stuff. I wasn't surprised that he reset the safety market. That was a given. But man, to do the whole shebang, I thought that was really, really surprising. Mr. Blaine, maybe you feel differently, but yeah, I was shocked by the record-breaking nature of this deal. How about yourself?
It's one of those things where like I expected it, but also didn't at the same time. Like he's that good. There's no doubt in my mind this is a great contract. Like I don't care if he became the highest paid football player ever. Like that's how important he is to this team, in my opinion. So to have him re-sign that and for it to break all the records, I was a little shocked because like that's huge. That's a
lot
big
of money.
thing. Yeah, there's a lot of really good defensive backs in this league. And to know that we just paid one higher than any of them, meaning that he's, in my opinion, better than any of them, that's huge. That's a big. Will it get broken soon? Probably when Sauce Gardner has to re-up and stuff like that. But to have that claim now, I'm happy about it. I'll take it.
Absolutely, and his timing could have been better. He just happened to have, his best season right before he hit free agency, which good for him. Taking advantage. And it was just an outstanding, convolution of effects and all that stuff. And it was just really impressive to see him be able to cash out like that. And for the Bucs, they've got 4 more years of Antoine Winfield Jr., which is not great thing. Yeah, absolutely great news. So yeah, I figured we'd touch on that because the extension seemed inevitable and it seemed kind of set in stone that he'd reset the safety market. But I thought it was kind of an interesting thing that he not only reset the safety market, but also all defensive backs. That was really impressive. So I figured we'd talk about that. But as promised from last week's episode, we've got NFC South team draft grades because my goodness, it was an eventful NFL draft. We're going to be talking about it. throughout this first half or throughout this episode, really, because hey, it's the biggest event of the off season, so we got to stretch that thing out for a
as
while.
much as we can.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, obviously, other teams picked it other than the Bucs. Other teams tried to make their teams better and all that stuff. And the NFC South are the teams that the Bucs are going to play the most. So I figured we'd talk about them, and we'll start with the team that had no first round pick of their own. The Carolina Panthers. They were the worst team in the NFL last year. They're coming off rookie quarterback Bryce Young's first year. They obviously poached Dave Canales for their head coaching position, former offensive coordinator for the Bucs. A lot of changes this offseason for the Panthers. They invested heavily into their offensive line and all that. But focusing on their draft, I gave their draft a C just because, man, they focused on the skill position players, wide receiver, running back in their first 2 picks. And they traded away Brian Burns, so I just thought that was just a really strange thing. I get drafting a wide receiver, but then following it up with a running back just made me kind of scratch my head. They didn't take any edge rushers in this draft class. They kind of rounded out their draft by taking some tight ends, corners, linebackers, filling out their depth. I get all that, but yeah, just a weird missed opportunity for me. So I gave them a C. But Mr. Blaine, how about yourself? What draft grade did you give the Carolina?
I'm leaning more towards like a B.
Oh, okay.
But you know me, I am a position player, a skill player kind of guy. Like when it comes to drafts. So
for sure.
For me, I think they drafted well for what they need at those positions. I will say the running back in the second round was a little weird because Hubbard didn't play bad last year.
They signed Miles Sanders to
and Miles Sanders. Like I think you've now got 3 running backs who could be starting running backs.
Yeah.
So the second round pick was a little weird for me, which may move it down to like a B-. The fact that you didn't take any DNs after trading Brian Burns is
it's weird,
questionable to say the least.
Yeah.
But no, the Xavier Legette pick is one of my favorite picks.
Yeah, I really like that pick.
Be a stud.
Yeah,
I think he can fit that Mike Evans role in Carolina a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Mike Evans. Don't get it twisted, but I think he's going to fill that number 1 receiver role in the future. And I mean, we all know how much Canales likes to run the ball, so maybe he needs all 3 running backs. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, maybe Canales has, the kind of traumatized from the lack of running back depth that the Bucs had this past year. So he went really hard in the opposite direction.
Very well could be.
For sure. I mean, my favorite pick from this draft, I know the Xavier Legette pick was great, but Jadavion Sanders, the tight end in the 4th round, I thought that was a steal. I thought that was a really interesting pick. He should be really, really good for them, especially just because Tommy Tremble hasn't really worked out. Hayden Hurst was very up and down last year. I don't even think he's still on their active roster. So Sanders should theoretically be able to step in and compete for a starting spot.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big pick for them. And if they had picked that second round pick just killed them for me, or killed this draft class for me. If they had picked an edge guy, or even a corner, honestly, that would have been fine too. That would have saved this draft. But instead, I got to give them a C. But now we'll move on to the Saints. They had an interesting draft as well. They had quite a few needs. They're just such an old team that they've really got a lot of kind of retooling to do. And they started out at offensive tackle with Talise Fuaga, Oregon State guy. I mentioned him specifically just for you. They also had Kool-Aid McKinstry, the corner out of Alabama, in the 2nd round. I thought that was a really great pick for them. Just because, being able to get a potential 1st round pick for their secondary in the 2nd round is huge. And then they waited until the 5th round to make their 3rd selection, and they had 3 picks in that round. The highlight of that was Spencer Rattler, the quarterback out of South Carolina. So I gave this draft a B+. I thought they did a nice job in the first couple of rounds of addressing some heavy needs. I really liked the Rattler pick in the 5th round because I felt like that's the perfect sweet spot for him. And who knows, Derek Carr, I don't know how much they're going to commit to him. It's nice to have a little bit of a project / backup insurance plan type of deal. So I gave it a B+. How about you, Mr. Blaine? What did you give the Saints?
I think that's a perfect grade. Had they taken a D end earlier, taken a D end at all, I don't think they took a D end.
No,
because their D ends are getting old. Like, let's be honest.
For sure.
Had they taken another team had they taken a D end, I would have been higher on this draft. Solid draft. I think you got 2 starters with your first 2 picks.
Yeah.
And then someone who can fill in at quarterback if Derek Carr does go down. I hate that they did it, that they drafted good. I mean, there's not a pick on here that I don't like, if I'm being honest with you.
No, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Even Bub Means out of the wide receiver coming in the 5th round, like dude's pretty quick. Like the whole draft. I mean, I want to talk trash on him, but I really can't.
Yeah. I mean, I was really pleased with what they did, just from a football fan perspective. Obviously,
Exactly.
For the Bucs, it's not fun. But yeah, that they can't really run it back with Trevor Penning at left tackle.
No.
That experience was just a disaster. So they needed to get a left tackle there. And maybe, Ryan Ramczyk's getting a little up there in years, so maybe they move Penning to right tackle after this year or something. That's a future problem. But they definitely needed to address the position, and they did. And I thought that was huge. So yeah, B+, really, really solid draft. And, the Saints are just so old and ancient. I'm with you on the defensive end. Their 4-3 defense, they got Cam Jordan, and I don't even know who on the other side.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't even tell you. Well, now didn't they sign Chase Young, didn't they?
Oh, that's right. Chase Young. Exactly.
Well, I mean, it's a 1-year deal, so that's irrelevant to me. Like,
for sure.
Build for the future, unless they plan on signing him to an extension, which I don't even know if they'll be able to with their cap hell.
Yeah, it's tough.
So
yeah, they're in a weird spot.
Chase Young, so I understand a little bit of not taking a D end, but you better hope you can re-sign Chase Young then, because you need to build for the future.
Yeah, and it's tough because they've drafted a few defensive ends in the higher rounds that just haven't worked out.
Yeah, they haven't panned out. That's fair.
I think that maybe they were coming from a place of, well, we've already invested so much draft capital into the position. But then you're kind of doubling down on your mistakes. It's a tough thing. When you don't have the salary cap that they don't have, you've got to kind of fill in holes with draft picks wherever you can. So it's a tough thing. I'm with you. It would have been nice for them to get an edge rusher, but at the same time, it's tough. It's tough. But now we'll move on to by far the most interesting and controversial team of the NFC South for this draft class, the Atlanta Falcons. If you were watching our live draft episode, Michael Penix Jr., he was the first pick. Yeesh. Just can't even get into the stupidity or just the irrational behavior of the Falcons in this draft class, and starting from the first round. And then they traded all the way up to pick number 35 in the second round to draft a guy that many boards had going in the late 50s or 60s. It was just a weird start to the draft, and they never really recovered. If you're making those kind of mistakes with your first 2 picks, then it's hard to recover from that. So I gave them a D. The only way they can recoup from this is if Rook, the second pick, and Michael Penix Jr. both turn out to be studs and we all just look stupid, or if they maybe get a steal later in the draft. And for Penix Jr., he really has to be their franchise quarterback. Like, once Cousins leaves, he has to be the answer, because if not, man, it's a huge missed opportunity. If he's not their next Jordan Love, like with the Packers, then this was just such a missed opportunity, such a waste of a pick. And it's a top 10 pick. Jordan Love was a late first round pick, and this is number 8 overall. So I was just really confused by that. And that's really all there is to say. What about you, Zach? How'd you grade this draft?
When the draft was happening, I was on the same page you're on. Like, what the hell are they doing? This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Then I slept on it. All right. I don't like Atlanta. I want to make this very clear.
Of course.
They got a quarterback for the future. I have said it many times throughout this draft process that I believe Penix Jr. is going to be the best quarterback in this draft. They got him at number 8. You've got him for 5 years now. Kirk Cousins is only signed for 4 years. We don't know how good he's going to look coming off the torn Achilles.
Right.
You've got a cheap backup option now. Well, cheap. It's not cheap, but cheap for a quarterback. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Cheap enough, I should say, because he like the odds are he might have to start. We don't know what he's going to look like coming off of the Achilles injury.
That's true.
A lot of people also said Penix maybe wasn't ready for the league right away. Like, they were saying he he's an older guy, but he might not be the most pro ready right away. I think he will be, but it's irrelevant. So my defense to that pick is they've now got a quarterback of the future, and I believe that was also what our producer said during the draft. But I don't hate that pick at all. The Rook pick, that one surprised me. There was a bunch of better options.
The trade up too, yeah.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, Newton hadn't gone yet at 35. So Newton, in my opinion, was a better D tackle than
or an edge rusher. I mean, it was
there was. Now I will say they took Braylon Trice in the third round.
Of course, and that was a solid pick for
Great
sure.
pick. I think that he should have been a second round guy. A lot of guys that I thought were better fell in this draft in a weird way. So the Braylon Trice pick was huge. Then you look at it and you realize they took 3 defensive tackles in this draft.
Yeah, they're bulking up.
So I'm gonna give them a D plus, but not for the Michael Penix pick. Like the Michael Penix pick, the more that I sleep on it and the more that I think about it, I like it. I feel bad for Kirk Cousins because he's I think he's expecting to be the guy for the next 4 years, and I don't think that that's the case. I think that they get 2 years out of him now, and he's done.
It's just the only. I guess my only counter argument is just that why give Kirk Cousins all that money if his Achilles really is that much concern?
Agreed 100% on that. Like,
and if you're going to pay a quarterback that much money, then you're committing to winning now. And this is not a win now move. This is not a win in the next 2 years move. This is very much a big picture, long-term move. And I just don't think that you spend an 8th round pick on Michael Penix for that reason. If they were to trade back, if they gained some more draft capital and took him in the late teens, early 20s, hey, okay, I get it. If they had flipped with Minnesota or something, if they'd have gotten Minnesota's 2 first-round picks and had Minnesota jump, then maybe it's a different story or whatever the case may be. I don't know. It was just,
that is a fair argument. I guess I'm going more based off just the player that they're getting. In my opinion, the player they're getting, I should say. I'm not going off of who they could have had or should have had because, in my opinion, you're right. This is not a win now move. There was so many other players you could have gotten here and been in a win. Dallas Turner would have been phenomenal in Atlanta. There's a lot of players that would have been really good in Atlanta. This is a move for the future, and I think that with the I'm trying to figure out how to process it in my head. I'm basing this off the draft and not off the front office's decisions in the offseason prior to the draft.
No, I get you.
Because I agree with you. You should have never given – Kirk Cousins was not worth that much money to begin with.
Yeah, and if they don't sign Kirk Cousins and just do this, then, hey, no problem here. Like,
if you knew you were taking Penix at 8, you should have just not signed Kirk in my opinion.
Exactly.
Because if you had this feeling about him, which you obviously did to take him at number 8.
Yeah, exactly.
Why even – like, I'd almost rather risk running a less than stellar quarterback like – keep Desmond Ridder if you don't have a successful year, then you got another early pick next year.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It was a weird decision in the context of their other offseason moves.
Yeah.
But if you want to take it in the context of just the guy they're getting, I get that. And that's probably a smart way to do it because, you're trying to evaluate a team's decision-making in the NFL draft instead of their decision-making throughout the offseason.
Yeah, because the rest of the offseason, they've been garbage. Hot water.
For sure. So, yeah, it's just a weird decision in the context of their other NFL, offseason decisions. But that's all right. That's good for the Bucs. And if you're trying to do the opposite of what the Falcons did on draft night, if you're trying to upgrade your wardrobe and make that wardrobe an A+, a first-round pick, then definitely head to the shop.rblrsports.com site. We've got some really great gear for you. Rays, Bucs, Lightning, Rowdies, you name it. Tampa Bay sports fans, we've got it for you. And we'll give you a promo code since it's the middle of the offseason and, it's boring out there for football. So we'll give you a promo code that's Cannon, CANNONS. Type that bad boy in, get 10% off your entire order. So moving on, now we've talked about the NFC South, but there are other teams that the Bucs are going to play around the league, and they all made some draft picks too. So we'll focus on the NFL as opposed to just the NFC South in the second half of the episode. So who was the biggest surprise for you from around the league in this draft? Because there were not just the Falcons. Michael Penix Jr. was not the only like kind of hold your breath kind of thing. So for you, what was the biggest surprise from around the league in this draft?
I think the biggest surprise to me was not necessarily a team, but all the defensive backs falling.
That's a good point.
That was huge to me. And if I had to pick like just a team that surprised me, would be Buffalo's inability to take a good wide receiver in the first round. Like they traded with the Chiefs last year or the year before. One of the trades where the Chiefs got a good wide receiver, they traded with them, and then now they trade again and they get the fastest receiver in this draft class to pair with some of the fastest players in the league on the Chiefs. It just seems like the Bills don't want to beat the Chiefs at any point. They're like, here, you take them, we're good. We'll get a slower guy that we like a little bit less, but it's okay. So I think that was the biggest surprise to me, seeing the Chiefs trade up with the Bills and getting the fastest guy in the draft.
Yeah, that was definitely a big kind of head scratcher for me too, especially because, Buffalo is just – they've lost Kansas City so many times, and giving Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid that kind of weapon just seems really silly, especially in the context of Stephon Diggs being traded. They could have used a huge playmaker on the outside for Josh Allen, and instead they declined. And then, you give them credit. They still picked up Keon Coleman. Their draft outside of that was fine.
Yeah, it was a decent draft. Even if you take out just the trade is the part that got me. Like, you could have traded with anybody else. Why would you trade with it? And it wasn't even a big return, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was not. Yeah,
so
it was.
You could have traded with any other team.
For sure. And it's not like Kansas City's not in their division or anything, but they're a direct rival. They're going to be the team.
Yeah, if you're going to make it to the playoffs, you're going through Kansas City. Like, that's just how it works in that division now.
Yeah, so it's very strange.
My division.
No, you're good. Yeah, it's very strange for them to continue to kind of supply Kansas City with some really good wideouts, especially since Kansas City's wideouts have been, they've had their troubles this offseason, and it's not been fun. So they've had to replace some guys, and they got a good one. My biggest surprise, I love the cornerback. The cornerback mention. I thought that was really surprising too. They just fell so hard, and even bigger than that, defensive players in general. It was just like offense. What
was it, 15 or 16 straight offensive players to start the draft?
Just ridiculous stuff. Yeah, it was really weird. So that trend was really weird. But yeah, as far as the team goes, I don't know. It's hard to nail a specific team. Buffalo was a great mention. Obviously, Atlanta had a weird one. Our producer's going to get mad at me for this one, but I thought the Broncos were maybe a bit weird for the Bo Nix draft. I don't know. I thought that maybe they could have traded back. Also, the Raiders not trying to jump and get a quarterback was very.
Yeah, that's a great shout. The Raiders tripped me up. I expected them to get a quarterback.
Yeah, on the one hand, I get it because they're not Bo Nix or J.J. McCarthy away from being good. But man, what do you do with Devontae Adams? You can't run.
Who are they running it with right now?
I think it's Aiden O'Connell, the guy that they drafted out of Purdue last year.
Okay. Well, he had a decent year. He wasn't good, but he was decent.
I get you. And truth be told, like I said, if they tried to trade up, they could have really compromised some of their future assets for a quarterback that they're not sold on. So I don't blame them. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever that saying is. So yeah, I kind of get that, but it was a bit of a surprise that they didn't, try to be a little bit more active in that realm. But especially because next year's quarterback class looks rough. I don't even know what to expect from it. So it was a bit of a strange one for me for the Raiders. But on the opposite end of that, who had your favorite draft? Who was the team that you were like, oh man, I loved what they did this year? Who's your favorite draft this year?
I don't even want to say it live. I don't want to say it in person. I don't want to say it out loud.
Ah, come on, big guy. Don't be shy. It's all
There
right.
was two that I liked: the Patriots,
Okay.
and then the one that I didn't want to say, the Eagles.
Oh yeah. I mean the Eagles.
For you to get Quinion Mitchell and Deshaun in the same draft class is outlandish, and
It is bonkers.
frankly, it's BS. I'm done with. I hope the Eagles have the worst season they've ever had in their career or their history. They're not going to because of the draft class, but it's for you to get two of the, in my opinion, two of the top three corners in this draft.
That's tough. Yeah, especially because Dijon can be versatile. I mean, he can move to the safety position,
nickel.
Yeah, so the Mitchell one was tough because now they can give Bradbury a break and just be like, "Hey, man, sorry we gave you a really big contract, but man, he was rough last year."
Yeah.
So they can kind of just give him a break.
So they got Slay, Quinion Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean. Like that, just your corners there. If we want to keep DeJean at corner,
yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal. Yeah, not really much else to say there. The Eagles had a really fantastic draft class. I absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good ones. The Patriots, like you said, had a really good one. I loved the Bears draft class. I mean, it's hard to screw up 2 top 10 picks, but they really didn't. I thought drafting the wide receiver.
Caleb Williams is a bust.
All right, well, for sure. Well, regardless, they're setting him up for success, whether or not he's a bust or not. They're setting him up for success, and they're setting him up with a really, really nice team around him. So I really liked their draft class. I also didn't mind the Vikings. I've come around on the whole JJ McCarthy pick. I thought that was fine. I'm not really like pounding the table for him, but at this point, I get it. They got to commit to Justin Jefferson being really good. TJ Hawkinson's really good. They've got a decent offensive line. So they are kind of a quarterback away maybe from being competitive, especially in the NFC. But that's going to be a really good division next year. So I don't know what they're going to do. But I've come around on the JJ McCarthy pick. I was pretty low on him, especially early in the offseason. I was not excited for whoever to get him. But I'm coming around on the Vikings for sure. So those are my two favorites. But on the opposite side of that, whose draft did you really hate? Like, I know there was some negative surprises or some pleasant surprises, but whose draft were you just like, God, nauseating? Who
I really hated the Eagles draft.
Right.
We're getting married, but not you.
Hey guys,
that's all right. They probably agree with you. They're like, oh man, those Eagles.
Eagles draft this year?
No.
Do we hate the Eagles draft?
No.
No. Oh man. Okay. Fair enough.
All right, y'all go.
Yeah.
Y'all go.
And you're getting married.
All right, I love you guys.
Hey, it's an all family show.
Right? Exactly. Anyway, there wasn't necessarily a team that I hated. Like it's a weird. It's a weird draft for me because there was teams that I was like, I wouldn't have done that, but also like I understand how a team could get to where they were. I guess the Bo Nix thing with Denver, I feel like they could have traded back. Again, sorry, Eureka, I apologize. I feel like they could have traded back and gotten Nix and some more pieces in the trade. But I didn't really hate anybody's draft, if I'm being totally honest.
Fair enough. I think my least favorite was definitely Jacksonville's. Picking a wide receiver in the first round was just such a head scratcher for me. Just really confusing. I get that they lost, Calvin Ridley, and they're trying to, but they brought in Gabriel Davis. They've already got Christian Kirk, so it's just a really strange. They've already got Evan Engram. Like, there's only one football, So I thought that was really strange. They could have used a cornerback in the worst way. I mean, it was just.
Agreed.
I don't know who they're going to have covering guys out there at this point. So I was really confused by that class, as well as the 49ers. I did not like them getting Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I know that's kind of a fan favorite. Like, I know a lot of people love him, but they've already got so many weapons, and I don't understand why they didn't draft an offensive lineman.
I feel like they just didn't really necessarily need one. I
Yeah,
feel like the Niners, in my opinion, it was a take the best available. Now, do I think Ricky was the best available? No.
right.
So I agree with you. Like the person they took was weird, but I also like that's another one of those things where like maybe he's got tools that they really like.
I guess, but it's just they've already got the kind of the same problem as the Jaguars. They've already got too many guys asking for the ball.
And
Uh,
Ayuk wants out. I mean, it seems
yeah,
pretty obvious. So maybe they end up moving him.
I guess so. It's
I
just
don't
if
think
you're
they will, but
right, and I get that, but they've just been so close to winning the Super Bowl every freaking year,
yeah,
and to sort of look at your needs and say, "Oh man, like we've got this really awful interior offensive line. We could use some more corners. We could use another safety, maybe." They just had so many other draft needs, and they decided to go, triple or quadruple down on a strength, which is
yeah,
playmakers. And I don't know. It was just a very confusing draft class for San Francisco and Jacksonville,
yes.
especially because they had an opportunity to really shore up the rest of their team. But hey, stuff happens. But one of the bigger stories from this draft as well was also kind of needle moving picks, any teams that really changed their fortunes in this draft class. And I thought there were a few that really, really made some nice moves to really make a difference. And I'm going to be honest, I thought that the Bucs really had a big one. I thought that they really could potentially move the needle in a really good direction. I thought the Saints kind of did the same thing if we want to focus on the division, but even throughout the NFL, I thought the Commanders, you know, I think they're going to be fine. I really like the guy they picked in their draft class. They really did a nice job of supporting their team, and because they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young this past season, so there's kind of a lot of question marks on that team. So they're embarking this new era, and I thought they did a really nice job of kind of starting strong. How about you, man? Who was a real needle mover on either side, good or bad?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I have a different opinion on the Bucs draft, and it appears a lot of other people have.
For sure.
I don't think we moved the needle either way. I think we just stayed the same way we were. Our offensive line got better, maybe, and our defensive backs are worse than they were last year at this point. So, I mean, we can have a good run game, but if we have to score 60 points every game to stay in it, we're not going to be running the ball anyway. So,
Right.
In a positive way, I would say the Eagles continued to build up a young defense that I think is going to be very good for a long time. And then I think that the Patriots, I know I'm talking about the same two teams, but the Patriots set themselves up for success, even if, let's say, Drake May isn't a great quarterback. They took another quarterback who we were both really high on, and Joe Milton. If they can develop him, and let's say Drake May is not that guy, then they've got a quarterback in the same draft. So I'm not sure that we see it with the Patriots right away. So I don't know if I'd call it a needle mover, but for their future, I think they moved the needle.
Yeah, and the Patriots were really interesting. The Ravens were really interesting. Obviously, I already mentioned the Commanders. I mean, there were a lot of really, really solid draft classes out of this year's draft.
Yeah.
I thought that the Chargers did a really nice job. I know people kind of, myself included, I was very concerned about them going Joe Alt instead of any of the elite wide receivers in the
Agreed.
top 10. But at the same time, I get it. Justin Herbert's no good if he's injured. Gotta make sure he's protected. So I get that, and I kind of dig Lad McConkey in that second round. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I really like what Denver did in their draft too.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just trying to get into Eureka's good graces now.
For sure. No, I feel
Makes
you.
going to be a great quarterback.
Right. No, we'll see. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see for the Broncos. But we're coming to the end of our episode. We really appreciate y'all for tuning in. We're going to talk about the schedule next week. I know the schedule came out. You were probably hopping on this episode thinking, oh, man, they're going to be talking about the Bucs opponents.
Clickbait. Got you guys.
That's right. Don't worry. We'll do just that next week. We'll be back with another episode. So if you want to stick around for that episode, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. You can also give us a follow at RBLR Sports. Like I said, we really appreciate y'all tuning in. It's going to be a long off season and we're in the middle of it, but hey, every day, every week, we're closer to the NFL season starting back up, and it's always a beautiful thing. So we really appreciate y'all, and as always, go Bucs.
Go Bucs.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.